Jeffrey Smith, Howard Liebengood. I knew Officer Liebengood. I saw Howie most days at his post at the Russell office building. His colleagues will tell you no officer was more dedicated to the mission of the Capitol Hill Police Department, the mission and duty to serve and protect, and I'm proud to have called him a friend. We will never forget Officer Eugene Goodman and the hundreds of other officers who were heroes on the front lines that afternoon, that evening, many of whom sustained injuries. To honor that kind of sacrifice and avoid future attacks, we have got to take a really hard look at what happened on January 6th. The decision-making that led up to that day and the decision-making that allowed the Capitol to be breached and overrun. As the bipartisan media advisory announcing this joint hearing stated, the purpose today is to examine the security failures that led to a breach of the Capitol on January 6th, specifically the preparation and response efforts. There are key questions that have to be answered. First, some witnesses have suggested there was an intelligence failure. We need to know, was there credible intelligence about potential violence? When was it known and who knew it? Second, our witnesses have differing accounts about requests for National Guard assistance. We need to know, did the U.S. Capitol Police request approval to seek National Guard assistance prior to January 6th? And if so, why was that request denied? We need to know, was the request for National Guard assistance on January 6th delayed? And why, if that is true? And we need to know why it took so long for the National Guard to arrive after their support was requested. Third, the Capitol was overtaken in a matter of hours. We need to know whether Capitol police officers were properly trained and equipped to respond to an attack on the Capitol. And if not, why not? And we need to know why the Capitol complex itself was so vulnerable and insecure that it could be so easily overrun. My hope is that today we get clear answers to these questions from our witnesses. We need to know what happened and how to ensure this never happens again. It's that simple. I'll be listening carefully, as I know my colleagues will, to the testimony of the witnesses before us. These events on January 6th showed that while our democracy is resilient, our democracy at times will be challenged. We've got to be up to that challenge. That certainly includes securing this Capitol, the citadel of democracy. That's something we can all agree on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Portman. Before I introduce the panel, it's important that we hear from someone. We all believed it was important that we hear from someone who was on the front lines that day. And I'd like to recognize Captain Carnicia Mendoza of the U.S. Capitol Police. Captain Mendoza has been a member of the Capitol Police for almost 19 years with 13 years of leadership experience. She currently serves as a field commander in the Special Operations Division, where her duties include acting as a field commander for significant security incidents. She has served in various divisions within the department, including the Command Center, House Division, and Senate Division. Before she joined the Capitol Police, she served as an active duty soldier in the United States Army, and she has received various awards for her work, including her work on recovery efforts during the Pentagon attack on 9/11. Born and raised in Missouri, Senator Blunt, Captain Mendoza graduated from Park University with a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice Administration. She has 2 children. On January 6th, she rushed to the Capitol when she heard that her fellow officers needed immediate help and assumed command in the rotunda as she and her colleagues fought to push back the rioters and ultimately drive them out of the building. Captain, thank you for sharing your story today.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before the committee today, and thank you all for your service to our country. My name is Captain Carnicia Mendoza, and I've served with the United States Capitol Police for 19 years. I take a lot of pride in my job. Prior to serving with the Capitol Police, I served as an active duty soldier with the United States Army. My last duty station was split between the Pentagon and the Washington Area Criminal Investigations Division.
Good morning, everybody.
I received various awards from the Army and the Capitol Police, to include an award for recovery efforts during the Pentagon attack. Unfortunately, I didn't save any lives, but there are certain lessons that always stuck with me after 9/11.
Still eating breakfast.
One of those lessons is knowing the unthinkable is always possible, so be ready. So I always take my job very seriously, as 9/11 is always in the back of my mind. With the Capitol Police, I have served in various operational, administrative, and collateral assignments. I'm currently serving as a captain in the Special Operations Division, where I have various responsibilities to include serving as a field commander and a field force commander for the Civil Disturbance Unit. Throughout my career, I have responded to and managed various critical incidents and events, from congressional and member security-related issues to shootings and armed carjackings. I have served as a CDU field force commander for multiple events, including the November 14th Million MAGA March. In my career, I've been activated to work demonstrations with various controversial groups, and I've been called some of the worst names so many times that I'm pretty numb to it now. As an agency, we have trained for and handled numerous demonstrations. It's something we do on a regular basis, and it's something I've always felt we've excelled at. During the Million MAGA March, multiple white supremacist groups, to include the Proud Boys and others, converged on the Supreme Court along with countergroups. The Civil Disturbance Unit fought hard that day, physically breaking up fights and separating various groups. I literally woke up the next day unable to move due to the pain. On January 6th, we anticipated an event similar to the Million MAGA March that took place on November 14th, where we would likely face groups fighting among one another. Additional civil disturbance units were activated that day. I was working the evening shift and had planned to report in at 3 p.m. I was prepared to work a 16-hour shift and assume field force commanders should the event continue into the evening and overnight shifts. It was approximately 1:30 in the afternoon. I was home eating with my 10-year-old, spending time with him before what I knew would be a long day, when a fellow captain contacted me and told me things were bad and that I needed to respond in. I literally dropped everything to respond to work that day early. I arrived within 15 minutes and I contacted dispatch to ask her what active scenes we had. I was advised things were pretty bad. I asked where assistance was needed and was advised of 6 active scenes. There was an explosive device at the Democratic National Committee building, a second explosive device at the Republican National Committee building, and large hostile groups at different locations outside the Capitol building. I advised the dispatcher I would respond to the DNC since that building was closest to where I was at the time. En route, I heard officers at the Capitol building calling for immediate assistance, so I proceeded past the DNC to the Capitol.
You know, for a fact, I couldn't not watch this hearing. I saw that it was on right now, so I was just kind of like, hey, I got to jump on here and show this with everybody, watch this with all y'all. Got to watch it with the fam. So please, you know, keep commenting, keep watching. This is very interesting. Oh, one more thing. I am a little bit behind because this testimony here has already happened. So I am a few minutes behind. I'm just giving you guys a heads up. So this isn't live, but it's as close as live as I could get. I figured her account is very important and we shouldn't miss this, okay? So smash that like button. Yes, Debbie, thank you so much. Hit that like button and let's get into it, shall we?
As I arrived to the East Front Plaza of the Capitol, I heard an officer yell there was a breach at the rotunda door, and I heard various officers calling for assistance at multiple locations throughout the building. Many of the doors to the building were not accessible due to the size of the crowd. I was able to enter a lower level door with the assistance of a Capitol Division officer. Once inside the memorial door, I immediately noticed a large crowd of possibly 200 rioters yelling in front of me. Since I was alone, I turned to go back so I could enter another door, but within the few seconds it took me to walk back to the door I entered, there were already countless rioters outside the building banging on the door. I had no choice but to proceed through the violent crowd in the building. I made my way through the crowd by yelling and pushing people out of my way until I saw Capitol Police civil disturbance units in riot gear in the hallway. They were holding the hallway to keep rioters from penetrating deeper into the building. I immediately jumped in line with them to assist with holding the crowd of rioters. At some point, my right arm got wedged between rioters and the railing along the wall. A CDU sergeant pulled my right arm free, and had he not, I'm certain it would have been broken. Shortly after that, an officer was pushed and fell to the floor. I assisted the officer to a safer location and got back in line. At some point, the crowd breached the line officers worked so hard to maintain. Civil disturbance units began to redeploy to keep rioters from accessing other areas of the building. I proceeded to the rotunda where I noticed a heavy smoke-like residue and smelled what I believed to be military-grade CS gas, a familiar smell. It was mixed with fire extinguisher spray deployed by rioters. The rioters continued to deploy CS into the rotunda. Officers received a lot of gas exposure, which is worse inside the building than outside because there's nowhere for it to go. I received chemical burns to my face that still have not healed to this day.
Damn.
I witnessed officers being knocked to the ground and hit with various objects that were thrown by rioters. I was unable to determine exactly what those objects were. I immediately assumed command in the rotunda and called for additional assets. Officers began to push the crowd out the door. After a couple hours, officers cleared the rotunda, but had to physically hold the door closed because it had been broken by the rioters. Officers begged me for relief as they were unsure how long they could physically hold the door closed, with the crowd continually banging on the outside of the door, attempting to gain reentry. Eventually, officers were able to secure the door with furniture and other objects. I'm proud of the officers I worked with on January 6th. They fought extremely hard. I know some said the battle lasted 3 hours, but according to my Fitbit, I was in the exercise zone for 4 hours and 9 minutes.
Damn.
And many officers were in the fight even before I arrived. I'm extremely proud of the United States Capitol Police. I'm especially proud of the officers who are the backbone of this agency and carry out day-to-day operations. I know with teamwork we can move forward. The night of January 7th into the very early morning hours of my birthday, January 8th, I spent at the hospital comforting the family of our fallen officer and met with the medical examiner's office prior to working with fellow officers to facilitate a motorcade to transport Officer Sicknick from the hospital. Of the multitude of events I've worked in my nearly 19-year career in the department, this was by far the worst of the worst. We could have had 10 times the amount of people working with us, and I still believe the battle would have been just as devastating. As an American and as an Army veteran, it's sad to see us attacked by our fellow citizens.
Word.
I'm sad to see the unnecessary loss of life. I'm sad to see the impact this has had on Capitol Police officers. And I'm sad to see the impact this has had on our agency and on our country. Although things are still raw and moving forward will be a difficult process, I look forward to moving forward together as an agency and as a country. In closing, I want to honor Chief Sun's leadership. I served under his command as a watch commander for 3 years and was able to personally see his hard work and dedication. He was fully dedicated to the United States Capitol Police, and he cared about every employee on the department. I often hear employees on the department praise his leadership and his ability to inspire others. He's made a significant impact on our agency. Thank you, Chief. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Captain Mendoza, for that beautiful statement and for your work on behalf of our country. I'm going to give you the bios on the other witnesses, and then Senator Peters will swear them in.
Let's see the bios.
Witness today is.
Let's see the bios really quick, and then I'm going to skip up to the parts where I'm going to try to get as close to live as we can without missing any other testimonies here, okay? Just so you guys know.
Robert J. Conti, Acting Chief of the Metropolitan Police Department of the District of Columbia. Acting Chief Conti was sworn in as Acting Chief of the MPD on January 2nd of this year. He first joined the department in 1989 as a cadet. After being sworn in, he became a patrol officer before being promoted to lieutenant and leading the force's intelligence branch. In 2004, he was promoted to captain and put in charge of the violent crimes branch. After being promoted to 2nd District Commander, he joined the Special Operations Division. For the next decade, Acting Chief Conti served in multiple leadership roles with the MPD, including as Patrol Chief of Patrol Services South, where he oversaw several police districts. He was appointed as Assistant Chief of the Investigative Services Bureau in March of 2018. Acting Chief Conti is a graduate of DC schools and holds a bachelor degree in professional studies from the George Washington University. Acting Chief Conti grew up in the Carver Terrace community in Northeast Washington, D.C. Our second witness today will be Mr. Stephen A. Sund. Mr. Sund served as Chief of the U.S. Capitol Police from June of 2019 to January 16th of this year. Mr. Sund joined the Capitol Police in 2017 as Assistant Chief and Chief of Operations. Prior to joining the USCP, he spent nearly 25 years with the Metropolitan Police Department, where he started out as a patrol officer in 1990.
Love you too,
From
Bill.
1999 to 2006, he served as MPD's Special Operations Division and helped plan several major events, including the 2001 and 2005 presidential inaugurations. After joining the MPD's Homeland Security Division, he rose through the ranks to become commander of the Special Operations Division in 2011. As commander of the Special Operations Division, he served as lead planner for both the 2009 and 2013 presidential inaugurations and many other national security special events. He received his Bachelor and Master of Science degrees from Johns Hopkins and his Master of Arts in Homeland Security from the Naval Postgraduate School. Our third witness will be Mr. Michael Stanger, former Senate Sergeant at Arms, who served in that capacity from April of 2018 through January 7th of this year. He joined the Senate in 2011 as Assistant Sergeant at Arms for the Office of Protective Services and Continuity. He has also served as Chief of Staff of the Sergeant at Arms and as Deputy Sergeant of Arms. Prior to joining the Sergeant at Arms office, he was a 35-year veteran of the United States Secret Service, where he served in many roles, including as the Special Agent in charge of the Washington Field Office. Immediately before joining the Senate, he served as Assistant Director of the Office of Government and Public Affairs for the Secret Service. He graduated from Fairleigh Dickinson University. He is also a veteran, having attained the rank of captain in the U.S. Marine Corps. Our final witness today is Mr. Paul Irving. Mr. Irving served as a Sergeant at Arms at the U.S. House of Representatives from January of 2012 through January 7th of this year. He joined the United States Secret Service in 1983 after briefly serving with the FBI. He served as head legal instructor for constitutional law and criminal procedure at the Secret Service Training Academy before joining the Presidential Protective Division during the George H.W. Bush and Clinton administrations. Following his White House service, he served as the Assistant Director for Congressional Affairs, Assistant Director for Government Affairs, Assistant Director for Homeland Security, and Assistant Director for Administration for the Secret Service. He retired from the Secret Service in 2008 as Assistant Director and worked as a private security consultant until his appointment as House Sergeant at Arms in 2012. He is a graduate of the American University and Whittier Law School. I want to thank our witnesses for appearing voluntarily today, and I look forward to your testimony.
Okay, let's see if we can skip up a little bit.
It is the practice, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you. May all be seated.
Now, I know a lot of people are sitting here saying, because I know a lot of people are sitting here during this, watching this video or watching this live thing, sitting here going, hey, why didn't they use any of these witnesses during the hearing, during the impeachment hearing and everything? I couldn't agree more. You know, we've only listened to one so far, and there will be more. But this is it's just interesting that they didn't use any of these guys at all. It's weird. It's weird. Something's not right.
You want to begin then, Chief Conti?
Sure. Good morning, Chairman Peters, Chairwoman Klobuchar, Ranking Members Portman and Blunt, and members of the committee. I am Robert J. Conti III, the Acting Chief of Police of the Metropolitan Police Department, the primary police force in the District of Columbia. I appreciate this opportunity to brief you on the events of January 6, 2021, a dark day for our country. I would like to begin by highlighting a few key facts to ensure the committees and the audience understand the very different roles of Mayor Muriel Bowser and the District of Columbia, including MPD, and those of congressional and federal authorities. First, MPD is prohibited by federal law from entering the Capitol or its grounds to patrol, make arrests, or serve warrants without the consent or request of the Capitol Police Board. Second, the President of the United States, not the Mayor of the District of Columbia, controls the DC National Guard. The scope of the request by the mayor must be limited to supporting the district's local jurisdiction and authority, which excludes federal entities and property. Third, since Mayor Bowser declared a public health emergency last March, the district has not issued permits for any large gatherings. Although the district and MPD take pride in facilitating the exercise of First Amendment rights by all groups, regardless of their beliefs, none of the public gatherings on January 5th and 6th were issued permits by the city. On the morning of January 6th, MPD was prepared to support our federal partners with a First Amendment assembly that was held primarily on federal land, while continuing to patrol and respond to calls for service throughout DC. Based on our experience with prior demonstrations after the election, we recognize that there was a possibility of violence, especially after dark as smaller groups of protesters gathered with malicious intent on our city streets. To be clear, available intelligence pointed to a large presence of some of the same groups that had contributed to violence in the city after demonstrations in November and December. The district had intelligence indicating the potential for violent actions in the streets of the District of Columbia. In preparation for the anticipated demonstrations and the possibility of violence on city streets, MPD was fully deployed on 12-hour shifts the week of January 4th, with days off and leave canceled. At Mayor Bowser's request, several area police departments were on standby in DC.
Really?
And more than 300 members of the National Guard were deployed on district streets, providing traffic control and other services. However,
For real,
these
Vivalicious?
resources were barely enough to counter an
That's kinda
event
cool.
that had never happened in the history of the United States. A mob of thousands of American citizens launching a violent assault on the U.S. Capitol, the seat of our government, in an attempt to halt the counting of the electoral ballots, an essential step in the peaceful transfer of power in our nation. The mob's sustained assault on the Capitol precipitated an equally unprecedented response, with then Capitol Police Chief Steve Sun issuing an urgent request for MPD to come assist in defending the Capitol. Needless to say, when we received the call for help, MPD responded immediately. Within minutes, our members arrived at a chaotic scene. The violent mob had overran protective measures at the Capitol in an attempted insurrection prior to the arrival of MPD officers at the West Front. Our objectives were to, one, stop the rioters from entering the Capitol building and remove those that were already inside. Two, secure a perimeter so that the Capitol could be cleared for lawmakers. Three, enable Congress to resume their sessions to demonstrate to our country and to the world that our democracy was still intact. And lastly, once the third objective had been accomplished, begin making arrests of anyone violating the law. At 2:22 p.m., a call was convened with, among others, myself, leadership of the U.S. Capitol Police, the National Guard, and the Department of the Army. I was surprised at the reluctance to immediately send the National Guard to the Capitol grounds. In the meantime, by 2:30 p.m., the district had requested additional officers from as far away as New Jersey and issued notice of an emergency citywide curfew beginning at 6 p.m. From that point, it took another 3.5 hours until all rioters were removed from the Capitol. 90 minutes later, at 8 p.m., Congress was able to resume its critical work and fulfill its constitutional duty. Over the course of January the 6th and into the early morning of the 7th, approximately 1,100 MPD members responded to the Capitol. At least 65 MPD members sustained injuries. 5 people lost their lives on January the 6th. As we reflect on that dark day, we offer condolences to all of the grieving families. In closing, I appreciate the opportunity to highlight the heroism of MPD officers who put their lives on the line to protect the Capitol, Congress, and our democracy. But to ensure the continued safety of the district and everyone in it, we must be frank in looking at several critical issues. This assault on the Capitol has exposed weaknesses in the security of the most secure city in the country. The federal police forces in DC will be re-examining their security protocols, given the risk of both foreign and domestic terrorism. As the chief of the district's municipal police force, I must think about our preparations not only for possible attacks, but the daily impact of the changing operations of our federal partners. As they harden targets in the federal enclave, other buildings in the city under MPD jurisdiction may become more likely targets. This concludes my testimony. I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sunt.
No, Conti, not Sunt. Oh, I see what you're saying. I thought he was going to ask questions.
Chairman Peters and Ranking Member Portman, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify before your two committees regarding the attack on the United States Capitol that occurred January 6th. I have been in policing for almost 30 years. The events I witnessed on January 6th was the worst attack on law enforcement and our democracy that I have seen in my entire career. I witnessed insurgents beating police officers with fists, pipes, sticks, bats, metal barricades, and flagpoles. These criminals came prepared for war. They came with their own radio system to coordinate the attack and climbing gear and other equipment to defeat the Capitol's security features.
Don't forget to hit that like button if you don't mind. Get those likes up. Send that like all the way up. Please, please, please.
I am sickened by what I witnessed that day. Our officers fought valiantly, using batons, shields, chemical munitions, and pepperball guns to hold back the attackers. Capitol Police and responding law enforcement agencies showed tremendous restraint by not using their firearms, which would have likely led to a more chaotic situation and a possible mass casualty incident. No civilian law enforcement agency, to include the United States Capitol Police, is trained or equipped to repel an insurrection of thousands of individuals focused on breaching a building at all costs. I am extremely proud and appreciative of the Capitol Police officers, the Metropolitan Police Department, and the other law enforcement agencies that came to our assistance. A clear lack of accurate and complete intelligence across several federal agencies contributed to this event, and not poor planning by the United States Capitol Police. We rely on accurate information from our federal partners to help us develop effective security plans. The intelligence that we based our planning on indicated that the January 6th protests were expected to be similar to the previous MAGA rallies in 2020, which drew tens of thousands of participants. The assessment indicated that members of the Proud Boys, white supremacist groups, Antifa, and other extremist groups were expected to participate on January 6th, and that they may be inclined to become violent. Based on the intelligence that we received, we planned for an increased level of violence at the Capitol, and that some participants may be armed. But none of the intelligence we received predicted what actually occurred.
Is he planning his next flight out of town?
Extensive preparations were put into place for January 6th that included the full activation of the department, intelligence and information sharing with our federal and local partners and department officials, implementing a significant enhancement for member protection, extensive operational enhancements to include significant civil disobedience deployment, and an expanded perimeter. We also distributed additional protective equipment for our officers and coordinated outside agency support. As recent as Tuesday, January 5th, during a meeting I hosted with my executive team, the Capitol Police Board, and a dozen of the top law enforcement and military officials from D.C., no entity, including the FBI, provided any new intelligence regarding January 6th. It should be also noted that the Secretary of Homeland Security did not issue an elevated or imminent alert in reference to the events at the United States Capitol on January 6th. We properly planned for a mass demonstration with possible violence. What we got was a military-style coordinated assault on my officers and a violent takeover of the Capitol building. I know that the images we saw of the officers battling for their lives and the visuals on national TV had a profound effect on the nation. The United States Capitol Police did everything we could based on the intelligence and available resources to prepare for this event. While my officers were fighting, my post was in the command center coordinating resources from numerous agencies around the National Capital Region to provide critically needed support. I was also briefing the 2 sergeant-at-arms and working on establishing accountability and priorities for the incoming resources.
Mark Jones, facts.
As Capitol Police and outside resources began to reestablish the security perimeter, I responded to the Capitol building to personally evaluate the situation and brief the sergeant-at-arms and leadership. I acknowledge that under the pressure of an unprecedented attack, a number of systems broke down. One of the reported issues described by officers was a lack of clear communications and directions from officials. It appears that the established incident command for the Capitol building was overwhelmed by the enormity of the situation and as officials battling insurrections as opposed to directing the response. There have also been reports that some officers may have felt confused or let down during the attack. As an official who cares as much as I do about my colleagues, nothing is more painful to me. These issues must be addressed through new training, policies, and procedures. Even our best efforts were not enough to stop this unprecedented assault on the Capitol. However, casting blame solely on United States Capitol Police leadership is not only misplaced, but it also minimizes what truly occurred that day. The focus going forward needs to be on the efforts to improve intelligence and the coordination of security measures between all involved agencies. Hopefully, this will be part of the focus of an independent after-action committee to look at all aspects of the January attack on our nation's Capitol. In closing, I want to again recognize the heroic efforts of the Capitol Police officers, who on January 6th, outnumbered and against the odds, successfully carried out their mission to protect the members of Congress and the legislative process. I couldn't have been more proud to be part of their team and the USCP mission. I'm available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sund. Mr. Stanger.
Chairwoman Klobuchar, Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Blunt, and Ranking Member Portman. The National Capital Region is a unique environment for law enforcement. The U.S. Capitol Police, in conjunction with the sergeants at arms, work to provide security of the Capitol complex and its population. But there is a shared responsibility with other law enforcement groups within the region. Sharing of information and resources is paramount for success. Once assuming the position of the Senate Sergeant at Arms, enhancement of the working relationship between my office and U.S. Capitol Police had been a priority. I am a proponent of the concept of intelligence-led policing. This methodology can be used in assessing threats to individual members as well as threats to the campus. As in all intelligence operations, it is only as good as the analyst assessing it. And that assessment is then placed in the appropriate hands to take steps in order to mitigate any threats. We have to be careful of returning to a time when possibility rather than probability drives security planning. Though the events of January 6th certainly reveal that a review of intelligence should be done, returning to the concept of possibility driving security operations may result in poor use of resources. This is the constant give and take of security planning. There is an opportunity to learn lessons from the events of January 6th. Investigations should be considered as to the funding and travel and what appears to be professional agitators. First Amendment rights should always be considered in conjunction with these investigations. Law enforcement coordination in the National Capital Region should be reviewed to determine what can be done in a more efficient and productive manner. Intelligence collection and dissemination, training, and concepts on the use of force must be consistent. This integration should be accomplished without regard to self-interest and cost. In conclusion, whenever you prepare for a major event, just always consider the possibility of some level of civil disobedience at these demonstrations and plan accordingly. Events of January 6th went beyond disobedience. This was a violent, coordinated attack where the loss of life could have been much worse. This concludes my prepared remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Stanger. Mr. Irving.
Chairman Peters, Chairwoman Klobuchar, Ranking Member Portman, Ranking Member Blunt, and distinguished members of the committees. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. There's been a lot of press reporting about me, not all of it accurate, and I appreciate the opportunity to address some of that today. My name is Paul Irving, and I served as the Sergeant at Arms for the House of Representatives for the past 9 years. Serving in that role was one of the great honors of my life, and I count it a privilege to have worked with speakers from both political parties, including Speaker Boehner, Speaker Ryan, and Speaker Pelosi. I'm a law enforcement officer by training. My professional career started more than 40 years ago as an intern at the Department of Justice and then as a clerk at the FBI. I later became a special agent at the Secret Service, where I worked on 2 different presidential protection details and ultimately rose to the rank of assistant director. Like you, I am profoundly saddened by the events of January 6th. The entire world witnessed horrific acts of violence and destruction carried out by our very own citizens against the global symbol of democracy, our seat of government. I am particularly saddened by the loss of life, which included 3 officers. My heart goes out to all the families that lost a loved one. We began planning for the protests of January 6th in December 2020. The planning relied on what we understood to be credible intelligence provided by various state and federal agencies, including a special event assessment issued by the Capitol Police on January 3rd. The January 3rd assessment forecast that the protests were, quote, expected to be similar to the previous million MAGA March rallies that had taken place in November and December 2020. Every Capitol Police daily intelligence report between January 4 and January 6th, including on January 6th, forecast the chance of civil disobedience or arrest during the protests as remote to improbable. I relied on that intelligence when overseeing the security plan put forth by Chief Sund. The Chief's plan took on an all-hands-on-deck approach whereby every available sworn Capitol Police employee with police powers was assigned to work on January 6th. That meant approximately 1,200 Capitol Police officers were on site, including civil disturbance units and other tactical teams. I also understood that 125 National Guard troops were on notice to be standing by for a quick response. The Metropolitan Police Department was also on 12-hour shifts with no officers on day off or leave, and they staged officers just north of the Capitol to provide immediate assistance if required. The plan was briefed to multiple law enforcement partners. Based on the intelligence, we all believed that the plan met the threat and that we were prepared. We now know that we had the wrong plan.
Exactly.
As one of the senior security leaders responsible for the event, I am accountable for that. I accept that responsibility, and as you know, I have resigned my position. Much has been said about whether optics affected my judgment in a January 4 telephone call with Chief Sund and Senate Sergeant at Arms Stenger about a National Guard offer to incorporate 125 unarmed National Guard troops into the security plan. The Guard's purpose would have been to work traffic control near the Capitol. My use of the word optics has been mischaracterized in the media. Let me be clear. Optics, as portrayed in the media, played no role whatsoever in my decisions about security. And any suggestion to the contrary is false.
Interesting.
Safety was always paramount when making security plans for January 6th. We did discuss whether the intelligence warranted having troops at the Capitol. That was the issue. And the collective judgment at that time was no. The intelligence did not warrant that.
125, I agree with Tane Warrior on Twitch. Thank you for the comment. I do agree. 125 seems very low considering they knew that there was going to be protests. 125? That's it? 125. That's low. If you're thinking, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people are going to show up and show support, and possibly this could turn into a kerfuffle, right? Into a cluster F. Why would you only have 125?
If the chief or any other security leader had expressed doubt about our readiness without the National Guard, I would not have hesitated to request them. Chief Sund, Senate Sergeant at Arms Stenger, and I were confident in the chief's plan, and I did whatever I could to ensure that Chief Sund had the support needed to prepare and execute that security plan. And on January 6th, when I was asked for authorization to request National Guard assistance, I approved it. There are important lessons to be learned from January 6th. I commend the committees for conducting this proactive review of the events leading up to and on January 6th. I want to help the staff and members make changes and improvements and to ensure the tragedies of January 6th never occur again.
I agree. Tammy from the block, this dude messed up hard. Really, really hard. If that was an intentional mistake, if it was an intentional mistake, that's one thing. If it was just an absolute oversight, as he said, optics, and then that's another thing. But 125, and you know that there's going to be thousands of people showing up. That seems suspicious, don't you think?
I look forward to answering your questions.
You better
Thank
ask
you
him
very
some
much.
questions.
We'll now begin questioning.
Thank you.
I want to start out just to
Damn.
clear up one thing by just asking all of our witnesses a yes/no question. Based on what we know now, including the recent Department of Justice indictments, do you agree that there is now clear evidence that supports the conclusion that the January 6th insurrection was planned and it was a coordinated attack on the U.S. Capitol? Just say, everyone agree?
Yes.
Okay. Would you agree that this attack involved white supremacists and extremist groups?
Yes.
Okay. Would you agree that this was a highly dangerous situation, which was horrific, but could have actually been worse without the courage of the officers that you commanded?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so now let's look at what we knew leading up to it, or what you knew leading up to it, or what people that worked for you knew leading up to it. We knew leading up to it that on leading up to January 6th, President Trump sent nationwide tweets telling people to come to Washington on January 6th and saying, "Be there, will be wild." And according to public reporting by the Washington Post, the FBI's Norfolk Field Office issued a threat report on January 5th that detailed specific calls for violence online in connection with January 6th, including that protesters, quote, "be ready to fight," end quote, and, quote, "go there ready for war," end quote. I guess I'll start with you, Mr. Sun. When a critical intelligence report is received by the Capitol Police from an intelligence community source like the FBI, who usually would receive it? And I guess I'll start with, did you receive this report?
Thank you very much for the question, ma'am. I actually, just in the last 24 hours, was informed by the department that they actually had received that report. It was received by what we call one of our sworn members that's assigned to the Joint Terrorism Task Force, which is a task force with the FBI. They received it the evening of the 5th, reviewed it, and then forwarded it over to an official at the intelligence division over at U.S. Capitol Police Headquarters.
And so you hadn't seen it yourself?
No, ma'am. It did not go any further than that.
Okay. And then was it sent to the House and Senate Sergeant-at-Arms?
I don't believe it went any farther than from the over to the sergeant at the intelligence division.
Okay. And Mr. Irving, Mr. Stenger, did you get that report beforehand? Mr. Stenger, did you get the report?
No.
Okay. Mr. Irving?
I did not.
Okay. Okay, so I think that may have contributed part to the lack of information, but I'll leave that for the future. Now let's go back to another report. I know on January 3rd, Mr. Sun, you said in your written testimony that the Capitol Police published intelligence assessments of the event, including one on January 3rd. Do you mostly rely on your federal partners like the FBI to gather and analyze intelligence on potential threats to the Capitol and members of Congress?
Yes, I think what's important to realize as a law enforcement agency, we're a consumer of intelligence and information that's provided by the intelligence community. The intelligence community is 18 federal agencies that collect information, do the analyzing of the raw data, raw intelligence, and then provide it to us. So we're reliant on that information to be complete and accurate.
But in that report, we now know, according to your testimony, that tens of thousands of participants were likely to send on Washington. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And the January 3rd memo, according to the Washington Post, made clear that supporters of President Trump see January 6th as the last opportunity to overturn the results of the presidential election, and that, quote, this sense of desperation and disappointment may lead to more of an incentive to become violent. Is that correct?
Yes, it is, ma'am.
The article also quoted the memo as stating that unlike previous post-election protests, the targets of the pro-Trump supporters are not necessarily the counter-protesters, but rather Congress itself is a target on the 6th. Is that right?
That is correct.
And did you have any indication that many of these protesters might arrive armed or that members of extremist groups might be there?
We knew that members of extremist groups would be there, and there was social media calls for people to come armed. Yes.
You've also said that at a January 5th meeting with Capitol Police, the Sergeant-at-Arms and federal law enforcement, military officials, all present at the meeting indicated that there was no new intelligence to report for January 6th. Is that right?
That is correct, ma'am.
But your testimony states that the Capitol Police took a number of steps after these assessments, like what you said was the largest number of civil disturbance unit platoons possible, increasing dignitary protection coverage, coordinating with the D.C. police, and ordering all hands-on-deck status for Capitol Police. Is that right?
That is correct, ma'am. We took extensive efforts to prepare for the events based on the information, much of which you just reviewed, yes.
Okay, good. So if the information was enough to get you to do that, why didn't we take some additional steps? Why didn't you and others involved to be better prepared to confront the violence?
We expanded our perimeter. When we expanded the perimeter, again, we knew there was going to be some maybe limited violence, but we did. We expanded the perimeter. We took a number of steps to outfit our personnel with additional hard gear. We developed a plan for if we had protesters that may be armed. And that was one of the reasons, the expanded perimeter and the heightened risk, that I went to the Sergeant-at-Arms and requested the National Guard.
But now you realize it wasn't enough, those security measures. Is that right?
Well, that is, you know, hindsight being what it is. I mean, you look around the Capitol right now and you see the resources that are brought to bear based on the information we now know from January 6th.
Okay. Mr. Sun, you stated in your written testimony that you first made a request for the Capitol Police Board to declare an emergency and authorize National Guard support on Monday, January 4th, and that request was not granted.
That is correct, ma'am.
Your testimony makes clear that the current structure of the Capitol Police Board resulted in delays in bringing in assistance from the National Guard. Would you agree with that? That's one of the things we want to look at.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you think that changes are needed to make clear that the Capitol Police Chief has the authority to call in the National Guard?
I certainly do. I think in exigent circumstances, there needs to be a streamlined process for the Capitol Chief of Police, for the Capitol Police, to have authority.
Okay. And Mr. Stanger, do you think that reforms are needed to the structure of the Capitol Police Board to make that clear?
I think a review of the Capitol Police Board and their statutory authorities probably would be a good time to do this now. There's a lot of statutes out there in the Capitol Police Board that go back many, many years. Things have changed, and it's probably to make the board a little bit more nimble. It's probably not a bad time and an idea to take a look at what's there.
It's probably an understatement with what happened, but thank you. Mr. Irving, your views?
Facts.
I would certainly agree with both Chief Sund and Michael Stanger. I think a review would certainly be warranted at this time of the Capitol Police Board.
Mr. Sund, your written testimony states that you had no authority to request the assistance of the National Guard without an emergency declaration of the Capitol Police Board. On what rule, regulation, or authority did you base that view?
I'd have to go back and look the specific rule, but it's a standing rule that we have. I cannot request the National Guard without a declaration of emergency from the Capitol Police Board. It's kind of interesting because it's very similar to the fact, you know, I can't even give my men and women cold water on an excessively hot day without a declaration of emergency. It's just a process that's in place.
And to be clear, apart from the Capitol Police Board, you also face delays in getting authorization to bring in the National Guard from the Department of Defense. Is that correct? We'll be hearing from them next week.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Would you agree that there were serious issues at the Pentagon that contributed to the fact that guard troops did not arrive at the Capitol until about 5:40 that day, after most of the violence had subsided?
I don't know what issues there were at the Pentagon, but I was certainly surprised at the delays I was hearing and I was seeing.
Okay, very good. And my last question, just as of all of you, in addition to the reforms of the police board, which are very clear need to be made, any other suggestions that wouldn't involve classified information you have for us, Mr. Sund?
As reference to some of the recommendations, I would look at, again, one of the big things that I think was a contributing factor to this was intelligence. I think as you meet with the intelligence community and law enforcement in the intelligence community, we have a very good relationship. I think the aperture just needs to be opened up a little bit farther. Like Chief Conte had mentioned, January 6th was a new day. It was a change of what threat we face, and I think getting them to open the aperture and looking a little bit harder. And I think internally, looking at some of our policies, procedures, our processes for how we handle special events, how we handle incident command, was stuff we can do. And then looking at physical security of the building and the grounds, I think is going to be critical. I know a lot of people have talked about, the fencing, the open environment. I understand, and I know that goes way back, and members of Congress like the open environment. I think there are ways to develop a more secure campus while keeping an open environment, but I'll leave that for more classified or restricted hearings.
Okay, thank you. Anything you would add in addition, just any other thing you'd add in addition to what the former police chief laid out here, Mr. Stanger?
Anything else you want to say before I
I
rail
would be
in on
very
your ass?
supportive of those areas that the chief mentioned. I think he's right on the money there. I think there's maybe another area of use of force that probably needs to be coordinated better in the region here. But certainly intelligence needs to be taken a look at as to how it works. We have a lot of people.
Good call, Dorito. Definitely panicky.
Since 9/11.
Definitely panicky.
Maybe it's time to take a look at how efficient it is on the gathering of intelligence and the collection of intelligence.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to allow my colleagues to ask that same question of you, Mr. Irving, and you, Chief Conte, because I've gone over my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Sund, you've made or brought up the issue of intelligence throughout your testimony and the gaps that were there and how we need to strengthen the intelligence. But I was struck by the fact that you said the FBI report, and my understanding is that report had some fairly specific information that was troubling. That you said that report did get sent to the Capitol Police, that it went to the folks in the intelligence department, but then you were not aware of it.
All right, work it out, Peters.
Which raises a really big question. It's something coming in like that right before an event that I think is significant. It does not get to operational commanders who are there to deal with it. How can that happen? How can you not get that vital intelligence on the eve of what's going to be in a major event?
Exactly, Peters. Speak on it, Stephen. Say something.
I know that's something that's going to be looked at. I think that information would have been helpful to be aware of. Again, looking at the information for the first time yesterday, it is strictly raw data. It's raw intelligence information that has come in, seen on a social media post. Lots of people postings on social media that need to be, corroborated and confirmed. So it's coming in as raw data. So please keep that in mind. But
please keep that in mind.
That's something we need to look at. What's the process and how do we streamline that information getting to where it needs to go?
Please keep this in mind that we just thought it was just going to be a bunch of white people, and the white people don't do anything. These MAGA people aren't going to do anything bad. You know what I mean? They're going to do some peaceful protesting and not do anything. They're white. They're Trump supporters. They got nothing. We got nothing to worry about. They're going to be just fine. They're not Antifa or BLM. They're not going to try to burn anything down or wipe feces on the walls and try to steal freaking Nancy Pelosi's laptop and get people killed and all that stuff. That's not gonna happen. They're MAGA people. They're Trump supporters. What are they gonna do? They're not gonna do anything. Let's ignore all this all this information. Yeah, it'll be fine.
Well, I understand it's raw data, but it's the eve of the event. You're not going to have time to do the kind of analysis that you would normally like to do.
Thank you. This is the day before. He just said the eve of the event. You know what I mean? This is Christmas Eve we talking about. The night before all this ish goes down. The day before all this ish goes down. And this guy's going, let's just put it over to the side. They're just MAGA people. They're just Trump supporters like me. You know, they're Blue Lives Matter people. They're not going to do anything to us. They're not going to do anything to us. They're not going to do anything to the Capitol. They love their country. They're not going to do anything. It'll be fine. Let's push it over. This will be fine. 125 people. So he's doing security and all that. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine.
That is information that has to get to you. So that's clearly a major problem. And my question is also related to the report that was put out by Capitol Police, by your intelligence folks on January 3rd. The Intelligence Division of the Capitol Police issued a internal report which reportedly stated, and this is some of this has been out in the public domain, that instead of targeting counter-protesters, as you've seen in the prior events that occurred that you've referenced earlier, that, quote, this is quote that has been out in the public domain, that Congress itself is the target on the 6th by Trump supporters. Congress was the target. The report also mentioned that members of the Proud Boys, white supremacist groups, other extremist groups would be in attendance and, quote, again out in public sources, may be inclined to become violent. So you have your own report. Did you see that report that was put out on the 3rd?
Yes, I did.
Yes, I did, sir. Yes.
So how is not that a warning of some extraordinary measures? Now, I understand you increased and you had folks there and you increased your presence. But how is that not a real big warning flag? And if it was, what exactly did you do when you read that report?
So that was one of the reports that contributed to the fact that we expanded our perimeter. I reached out.
Real quick, I just saw a super chat. Sorry, I just saw it now. A-Lady 747, thank you so much for the love. Just sending love. Appreciate you all. Thank you so much for the $5 super chat. Thank you.
Looking at it, I'd reach out to the Metropolitan Police Department, just knowing, even before that report, knowing, what that extremists were likely to be there. In the previous reports for it that has been called for on social media for people to be armed. In talking with our partners over at the Metropolitan Police Department, I reached out to say, hey, you're going to be able to provide us some support.
Facts.
And we coordinated that additional support the morning of the 6th.
Oh,
so,
God.
yeah, we did take all that in consideration as we developed the extensive security plans for this event.
So you changed plans on January 3rd after getting that report?
We adjust our perimeter. We did a number of things.
What a number of things. Oh, my God. We did a number of things. I don't know what you're talking about. We did a number of things. We did a whole bunch of stuff. Whole bunch. See what we did? You see what we did? Did you see what we did?
We actually were adjusting our perimeter probably a little bit before that as well.
Oh, give me a break. You readjust.
That was happening before. So we're going to want to know more specifically when you get that.
Why
and then, of
you
course,
always
I think we're going to see you got additional
God.
information from the FBI, for example, but that did not get to you. So I understand that.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is important for us to understand, and I've heard all of you mention this in your testimony, that this was not just it was actually in response to Chairwoman Klobuchar's question. It was not just a random violent attack. It was actually coordinated that you saw. And I believe in your testimony as well. I'm going to ask other witnesses to respond to this too, because all of you mentioned that. How do you define coordinated? What did we actually see from these folks that leads you to believe that it was coordinated? And I think in your testimony now you just mentioned military-style coordination.
Come on, Peters.
So that would mean command and control. It would mean understanding the layout of the Capitol. It may mean knowing the internal operations of defense perimeters, of folks that are engaged. Talk to me. What did you see that leads you to believe that this was a coordinated attack? And I would like our other witnesses to engage in that as well.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Peters.
I'm able to provide you a quick overview of why I think it was a coordinated attack. One, these people came specifically with equipment. You're bringing climbing gear to a demonstration. You're bringing explosives. You're bringing chemical spray, such as what Captain Mendoza had talked about.
Yeah.
You're coming prepared. The fact that the group that attacked our West Front, approximately 20 minutes before the event over at the Ellipse ended, which means they were planning on
Get those
our
likes
agency not
up.
being at what they call
Crush
full
that like
strength.
button.
Watching the other event, saying, hey, that event's ending. Okay, everybody get on post. They're going to be marching our way, knowing that we may not be at full strength at that time. And then also the fact that we were dealing with 2 pipe bombs that were specifically, set right off the edge of our perimeter to, what I suspect, draw resources away. I think there was a significant coordination with this attack.
Anyone else have Chief Conte? I think you also believed it was a coordinated attack.
Oh, absolutely. My view is from the day of the incident. I think there were hand signals that were being used by several of the insurrectionists.
Can I just point something out? This dude, how he framed the camera. I'm sorry. I know he's saying some really important stuff right now. We're going to listen to it. But look how this camera's framed, y'all. He's like, I got to get the flags in, and it's got to say Metropolitan Police, and you got to see all this stuff. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting.
There was radio communication by several individuals that were involved. The coordinated use of chemical munitions to include bear spray by several people that were out there. I certainly believe it was coordinated. To Chief Sun's point regarding the placement of the pipe bombs in the areas, their discovery prior to this event, all of those things, and plus adding to that what we know in hindsight now as a result of the ongoing investigation that's being handled by the FBI, as they continue to scrub social media, I think we're learning more and more and more that this was clearly a coordinated effort.
Real quick, Mr. Irving, and then I'll ask another question real quick, Mr. Irving.
Based on the information provided by Chief Conte and Chief Sund, I would agree the evidence would indicate a coordinated attack.
So we're looking at folks that were coming out in intelligence reports that groups like the Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, others that were engaged,
3%ers,
these violent extremist groups.
Let's not forget all those.
We clearly need to collect more intelligence on. It'll be the subject of another hearing that we will do regarding this. But if you look at what the DOJ is now prosecuting, 200 federal cases. The FBI has linked at least 40 to extremist groups, 59 to other defendants that have connections on social media to violent or extremist rhetoric, conspiracy theories. This is clearly an area that we've got to focus on as to why did we not have more information about these groups that were coming here planning, and usually you leave a trail when you're planning.
Facts, Bill Sullivan on
Facebook.
Facts.
Using encrypted devices and other things, but those are things that we're going to have to be looking at. Clearly, the National Guard presence was critical. I know you're going to get a lot of questions related to that, but Chief Conte, in my remaining time, just a question. Yeah, and you mentioned this in your testimony, but in an earlier statement, Chief, you stated that you were stunned by quote, the tepid response of the Army officials in response to Chief Sund's request for assistance while the violent siege was escalating. Clearly, here we got a coordinated attack. All of you saw this immediately the way they were doing. I can imagine the conversations with the National Guard. And Chief, you were stunned by the tepid response. Could you clarify that and tell us exactly how those conversations went?
Yeah, so just after, sometime after 2:00 p.m., I had left the west front of the Capitol after initially being at the scene, assessing what was going on, looking at just how violent, looking at the violent actions that were taking place. Shortly thereafter, there was a phone call that was convened between several officials. Chief Sund was on the call, literally pleading there were several Army officials that were on the call. I don't know all by name who were on the call. Several officials from district government that were on the scene. Chief Sund was pleading for the deployment of the National Guard. And in response to that, there was not an immediate yes. The National Guard is responding. Yes, the National Guard is on the way. Yes, the National Guard are being restaged from traffic posts to respond. The response was more asking about the plan, what was the plan for the National Guard? The response was more focused on, in addition to the plan, the optics, how this looks with boots on the ground on the Capitol. And in my response to that was simply, I was just stunned that, I have officers that were out there literally fighting for their lives. And, we're kind of going through, what seemed like an exercise to really check the boxes, and there was not an immediate response. With when I asked specifically, Chief Son, was he requesting the National Guard, and was that request being denied? The response was no, we're not. From the U.S. Department of the Army was no, we're not denying the request. But they were concerned. They did have concerns. So I was just stunned at that response.
What? Wait, I'm sorry. Can we just, what? Did he just, what? Okay, so if I'm correct, fam, help me out. Let's work this out for a second, and we're gonna continue, I swear. So you're telling me, they had a response, or they had a request for boots on the ground, meaning some more firepower, and they were denied? Did I get that correct? Because I feel like I need to play that again, that little response again. He was stuttering all over the place, and I'm like, wait a second. Did he just say what I think he said? Hold on. I hate to roll it back again, but we got to play just a tiny bit. Am I correct in what I just heard? Did I hear what I just heard?
Literally pleading there were several Army officials that were on the call. I don't know all by name who were on the call.
So several Army officials were on the call. Good morning, Mia on Facebook. Good morning, good morning. And good morning, everybody who's watching on Twitch as well. And YouTube. Don't forget the YouTube fam. Good morning to everybody. But here it is, though. So there were a bunch of people on the phone calling for help. Like, somebody get somebody, right? Right. Okay.
Several officials from district government that were on the scene. Chief Son was pleading for the deployment of the National Guard. And in response to that, there was not an immediate yes. The National Guard is responding. Yes, the National Guard is on the way. Yes, the National Guard are being restaged from traffic posts to respond. The response was more asking about the plan, what was the plan for the National Guard? The response was more focused on, in addition to the plan, the optics, how this looks with boots on the ground on the Capitol. And in my response to that was simply, I was just stunned that, I have officers that were out there literally fighting for their lives.
Yeah.
And, we're kind of going through, what seemed like an exercise to really check the boxes, and there was not an immediate response. With when I asked specifically, Chief Son, was he requesting the National Guard, and was that request being denied? The response was no, we're not. From the U.S. Department of the Army was no, we're not denying the request. But they were concerned. They did have concerns. So I was just stunned at that response.
That was okay. So okay, guys, I'm sorry. So in the very beginning, he was basically saying one thing, and then at the end, it's like almost like he tried to pick up the ball that he just fumbled. You know what I'm saying? Did you hear what I heard? Because at first he was going, he was basically about to throw everybody, whoever else was on the phone lines, going, somebody get somebody, we need help, right? He's doing all that. Everybody's doing that. He's literally throwing everybody down, to throw everybody under the bus, right? And then he's trying to retract. He literally is trying to pick up that ground, that fumble ball, that ball that he fumbled. He's trying to get all right, but I'm gonna say the Son and Stephen Son and I was just stunned. What? So basically, they went online, they went on the phone, they said, somebody get somebody because we need some boots on the ground. It's a cluster F, or the new word that I like to say lately, a kerfuffle, right? It's a kerfuffle. And so they're going through all this stuff, they're on the phone, and they're saying, well, we're worried about the optics of this. Huh? He said the optics. Hold on.
Ground on the Capitol. And in my response to that was simply, I was just stunned that Chief Son was pleading for the deployment of the National Guard.
Oh, Son was pleading for sorry. It's like, you know what I'm saying? The stuttering is kind of messed up. Don't worry, I have that same issue too, so I understand his pain. But he literally is saying, so Sund was begging for help, begging for it. Sorry, this is kind of important information. Important. He's kind of keeping it real right now, but there's
literally pleading there were several Army officials that were on the call. I don't know all by name who were on the call. Several officials from district government that were on the scene. Chief Sund was pleading for the deployment of the National Guard.
Yes.
And in response to that, there was not an immediate yes. The National Guard is responding. Yes, the National Guard is on the way. Yes, the National Guard are being restaged from traffic posts to respond. The response was more asking about the plan. What was the plan for the National Guard? The response was more focused on, in addition to the plan, the optics, how this looks with boots on the ground on the Capitol.
Can I just point something out? My beautiful family, I love all y'all. Just do me one small favor. Crush that like button, please, if you don't mind. But let me just say this really quick, and then we're going to move on. I'm not going to keep reanalyzing what he just said, but this is really crucial stuff right here. They were literally worried about the optics and how this was going to come across. Not only just like the boots on the ground in Capitol Hill, but what this was going to look to the general media. Let's be real. Boots on the ground. It's funny how they'll do boots on the ground if it's another side of the fence. You know what I'm saying. If it's on the other side of the fence, it's another conversation. But when it's over here, they're going, oh, no. We're worried about the optics. We're so worried about the optics now. So concerned. Because let's be real. What are the optics if the National Guard is deployed upon Trump supporters that are all sitting there saying, we want our country back, et cetera, et cetera? How does that look? To me, it looks like what they would be doing if another party or another group of angry people were on the front steps of the Capitol. Let's keep it real. Let's keep it straight 100. They were not worried about anything except how the media was going to take this, chop it up, and spit it out to the rest of the world. Because they want only one side of the fence to look like bad guys, not the other side. They only want to smash their boots on people's faces that have certain other acronyms put onto their masks or shirts. Not the other way around. They don't give a damn. No, they don't give a damn about one side. They only care about this other side. And this other side, lo and behold, surprise, surprise, my baby sweeties. Something like that. Those people that they are so down to protect because they're so for the thin blue line and their blue lives matter and the MAGA na. They're all on the front steps acting a damn fool. Optics, y'all. Optics.
Thank you, Chairman. Chief Sund, if I have your testimony correct this morning, I think what I'm hearing you say is based on the intelligence you saw on January the 3rd, after that on January the 4th, you decided this was going to be a different kind of protest than you'd seen in November and December.
See what I said? I said what I said. Did I or did I not? Look at that. Look at God. Yeah.
And that's when you asked for an expanded perimeter and National Guard assistance. Is that correct?
So the information we received, yes, it was very similar to the previous assessments. It was just a little bit more detailed. We had been analyzing kind of how we responded to the previous MAGA marches and decided to expand the perimeter. Really, when you expand a perimeter as large as we expanded it, it creates a large area you have to defend. And that was the primary reason, knowing that these protesters were coming here. We were the focus of the protest and the expanded perimeter, and we knew this was going to be a long day.
So did you know?
I'm sorry. Didn't you already know it was going to be a long day? The eve of the actual protest or of the actual, such and such that happened on the 6th? Didn't you already know that? Did you already know that? Why is this some big surprise?
From the time you expanded the perimeter that you were going to have
Have
more
mercy.
help on all likelihood to defend that perimeter than your force would be able to provide?
We knew the additional support would be, we could utilize the additional support, yes.
So why did you believe that you needed the approval of Mr. Irving and Mr. Stinger to request assistance to the National Guard?
That's always been the case. We only requested the National Guard for very specific events, usually the inauguration, and that requires a declaration of emergency from the Capitol Police Board to utilize those resources.
Do you know if there's a statutory requirement for that?
I could look into that and get that to you as a follow-up if you'd like.
I don't know that there is, but I do know that if you get the approval to expand the perimeter and you don't have the assistance to do that, that's obviously a problem. Why didn't you contact the third member of the police board, the architect of the Capitol, Mr. Blanton?
Thank you for that question, sir. My conduit to the Capitol Police Board was usually through the House and Senate Sergeant Arms. They were the ones usually having the communications with the department, especially law enforcement related issues. They're both law enforcement, and also the fact that Mr. Stinger at the time is the Capitol Police Board chairperson. But usually outside the monthly Capitol Police Board meeting that we'd have, unless it was a issue specific to the architect regarding building structure, something like that, my conduit was regularly the House and Senate Sergeant Arms.
Why do you think the architect of the Capitol's on the police board?
As one of the voting members and providing oversight.
But apparently not enough oversight that
Yeah.
you thought you needed to involve him in the conversation.
Weedy word.
Like I said, my usual conduit was going through the House and Senate Sergeant Arms. That's already two people I got to go to, going to three. In the future, I guess if that's something that's going to be, that we'll implement, then I will implement it. But I was just following my usual course of action.
So Mr. Irving and Mr. Stinger both, let's start with Mr. Irving. Why was the request for National Guard assistance not approved at the same time you approved the expansion of the perimeter?
This is comical.
Mr. Irving?
Hamburger. Oh, he left. He quit.
I think you're muted, Mr. Irving.
He's buying more time to
Now
come
you're
up with his
definitely
excuse.
muted. Okay, now you should be fine. Go ahead.
He's just trying to find time
Am I
to
okay
make
now?
excuses.
You're
Yes.
Yes, now make
Thank
your
you. Thank
excuses.
you. I apologize for that.
Go ahead.
Senator, I did not take the call from Chief Sund
Ooh.
on the 4th as a request. Chief Sund called me to tell me that he had received an offer from the National Guard to provide us 125 unarmed troops to work traffic control in the perimeter of the Capitol.
Did you hear what I just heard? He turned down a phone call from Sund by request. Yeah. He asked not to pick up the phone. He refused to pick up the phone from Sund. Let's see his excuse. Let's find out what his excuse is. Let's find out. It's interesting.
Shortly after that discussion, I said, let's include Sergeant at Arms Stanger as chair of the board and another senior official with quite a bit of experience. The three of us talked it through. And during that call, the number one question on the table was, did the intelligence support it? Did the intelligence support that additional offer for those 125 troops?
Did you discuss this with anybody except Sergeant Armstanger and Chief Sund?
No, it was just this one phone call. And during that call, we all agreed that the intelligence did not support the troops and collectively decided to let it go. Michael Stenger then said, how about we put him on standby just in case, and that's what we ended up doing. But from what I remember, everyone was very satisfied that we had a robust plan, security plan, that was consistent with the intelligence that we had at the time.
Mr. Stenger, why did you think that the troops were on standby? They must have been standing way away from where we needed them if it took hours to get them here.
No
What
kidding.
did that mean they were going to be on standby?
what I did when I spoke to the chief, when the chief brought up to me this attempt to get the National Guard, and it apparently wasn't going forward, I suggested to him that he reach out. He knew the National Guard commander from his previous work in the Metropolitan Police Department. And I suggested that he reach out to the National Guard commander for a couple of reasons. One of them was I had either read in the paper or heard on the news that the National Guard in D.C. was rather reticent to engage with demonstrations this time because of the issues that had arisen during the White House demonstrations of a month ago, and that we need to make sure that the National Guard was engaged in this and that they would be willing to.
But do you think you did make sure that they were engaged and would be willing? I'm going to have to go to one more question here. Did you think they were engaged and would be willing if called on?
Yeah, that's what I think. What I asked the chief to determine from the general.
All right, Mr. Irving, you said in your testimony that when asked for National Guard assistance, you approved it. Mr. Sun stated that he asked for the National Guard assistance at 1:09, and you approved. It was approved at 2:10. Why would it take an hour to approve National Guard assistance on your part in that moment of crisis?
Word.
Mr. Irving.
Senator, from my recollection, I did not receive a request for approval for National Guard until shortly after 2 p.m. when I was in Michael Stanger's
All right,
office.
let me get that straightened out. Mr. Sun, do you know when you asked for National Guard assistance? Was it 1:09 or was it 2 p.m.?
It was 1:09, sir.
1:09. And who did you ask for assistance at 1:09?
It was from Mr. Irving. I believe he was in the company of Mr. Stinger at the time as well.
And Mr. Irving, why would you not remember that?
Senator, I have no recollection of a conversation with Chief Sund. At that time, I was on the floor during the Electoral College session, and my conversation with Chief Sund in that time frame was shortly before 1:30, when I recall he was describing conditions outside as deteriorating.
Yeah.
He may in fact be submitting a request, and I carried that forward, and that was as much as I can tell you. I have no phone record of a call from Chief Sund.
This dude has some serious selective memory. You don't recall having a conversation with this dude in one of the biggest historic moments of probably your life? One of the biggest historic moments of your life? You're not going to remember every stitch, every detail, what you were wearing, what the room smelled like, what coffee, what if you drank coffee that day, if you took how many, dumps in the toilet. You're going to remember everything. This dude is mother-loving lying.
Did you discuss that request at 1:09 or whenever you got it with anybody else, or did you and Mr. Stinger make that decision then?
No, I did not get a request at 1:09 that I can remember. The first conversation I had with Chief Sund in that time frame was at 1:28, 1:30.
Something like that.
And in that conversation, he indicated that conditions were deteriorating. He might be looking for National Guard approval and approval of our mutual aid agreements with local law enforcement. And I went to Mike Stanger's office awaiting an update.
Well, this is a time, Mr. Irving, I'm sure my colleagues will want to follow up on this because I'm out of time, but that's a time when the difference in 1:30 and 2:10 or 1:09 and 2:10 makes a big difference. One of the things I'm wondering, and we don't have time for you to answer this, but I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking here, is in a moment like this
dude lying.
If your focus is chiefly on the safety of House members, and I would certainly understand that, and Mr. Stanger's is chiefly on the safety of Senate members, maybe that's a problem here where the board really can't function as a board because you have such diverse areas of immediate responsibility, but whatever happened here doesn't seem to me to be in agreement with the various timeframes, and I'm out of time, Mr. Chairman.
Aye, aye, aye.
Thank you, Senator Blunt. And I wanted, Senator Peters and I are going to trade off chairing here with the votes, and we have a set order that all the
Hit
Senate
that like
staff
button,
have
y'all.
based on
Get
a
those likes
melded
up.
set of
Send it all
rules
the way
between
up.
the two committees. And I'd like to submit for the record a written statement from the United States Capitol Police Labor Committee dated February 23rd, 2021. Thank you. Senator Portman.
Without objection, Ranking Member Portman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good questions from
First of all, with
Mr.
regard to the
Blunt.
conversation we just had on the discrepancies with regard to National Guard assistance, I would request that both Chief Sund, you and Mr. Irving provide us with those phone records. I know there's been some interviews that have been conducted, but I'm not sure we have the phone records. And
Let's
that
get
seems
it to
like
80
that would
likes.
clear up some of the confusion. I want to shift
no
gears a
phone
little
records?
bit and talk about preparedness. Chief Sund, in your testimony, you talked about the need for better intelligence and better coordination. That was your conclusion. And I think that's true. And certainly everything we have learned indicates that was part of the problem. But what about preparedness? We've received information that prior to January 6th, Capitol police officers were not trained on how to respond to an infiltration of the Capitol building. Is that correct, Mr. Sund?
When you talk about infiltration, you talk about a large insurrection like we saw on the January 6th? No.
And why not? Why wouldn't we be prepared for an infiltration of the Capitol? Given the risk that's out there, I would say to Mr. Irving and Mr. Stenger, both of you have had distinguished careers with the Secret Service. I would ask you all to just give me a quick yes or no answer. Does the Secret Service have training regarding infiltration as an example of the White House? Yes or no? Mr. Stenger? Mr. Irving?
Senator?
I'll take that as a yes. If it's a
Yes.
no, okay. Mr. Stenger, are you a yes also?
He's like, if it's a no,
Okay.
you need to
Well,
get
it seems
fired.
obvious that you would have training on responding to an infiltration. So I think if nothing else comes out of this process, we've got to figure out how to deal with, again,
Shantoya,
the
thank
real
you so much for the
danger
$8
that is
super
out
chat.
there.
Thank
And
you.
it seems to me the intelligence reports, but also just the previous demonstrations
And Immortal, thank you, man. Immortal Badass.
would indicate
thank
a
you.
need for that kind of training. Let me ask you about something else, if I could, Mr. Sund, and that has to do with the U.S. Capitol Police officers that I saw on video and the world saw fighting against this attack in street uniforms or soft uniforms. Many of them did not have riot gear. I'm told, by contrast, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department provides all of its officers with such gear, including helmets, shields, gloves, gas masks. Having seen those incredibly disturbing videos and photographs of your brave officers attempting to hold the line to defend the Capitol without that kind of riot gear, are all Capitol Police officers outfitted with riot gear?
No, they are not, sir.
They're not. And why are they not?
So if you look at the way we outfit our officers, and it'll probably be very similar to, I think you'll find even with Metropolitan, I've been with Metropolitan for a number of years, they'll have a certain number of officers, CDU platoons as they call. It's not the entire force that's outfitted to the level 1 CDU with the big protective gear, the helmets, things like that. So we outfit a number of we have 7 CDU platoons that we can activate. 4 of those platoons, it's 40 people in a platoon, are activated to what we call the level 1, the full CDU gear and equipment. It requires extensive costs, extensive training to keep and maintain that level. For us, a number of our officers are posted in interior posts, screening posts, things like that, where that gear wouldn't do them any wouldn't provide them any support. So we have determined up till January 6th that number of CDU platoons had sufficed for all the demonstrations that we had been dealing with on Capitol
Yeah,
grounds.
Mr. Sund, I would just say, obviously those officers who you say had interior posts needed it that day. So it's not accurate to say that they didn't need it. But I know that you activated 7 of these civil civil disturbance unit platoons, and that only 4 of them had riot gear. I don't know why you would have a civil disturbance unit platoon that didn't have riot gear, but you've just testified that that's true, that only 4 of them had it. Is that correct?
That is correct. And just one additional point, since I've been chief, I've actually pushed for every member in the department to have riot helmets. I had ordered those back in September. We had been looking at delays because of COVID from the manufacturer getting them delivered, and they actually just started being delivered January 4th and distributed to our officers just days before this, with limited numbers being given to the officers prior to this event.
Yeah, too late for many of those officers. Chief Conti, the comment was made that Metropolitan Police does not all have riot gear. Is that true? I thought that the Metropolitan Police Department officers did have access to riot gear. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, so we have 7 platoons that have the hardened gear, but all of our officers have ballistic helmets. All of our officers have batons. All of our officers are deployed with gloves as well, and gas masks. So our entire department are deployed with that level. But when you're talking about the harden all of the other extras, we have 7 platoons that have the additional. That's a different layer of protection.
But every officer has a helmet. Every officer has the protective gloves. Every officer has the baton. Is that correct?
And gas mask. That is correct.
And gas mask. Yeah. It appeared to the Metropolitan Police Department, I'm told, that the Capitol Hill police officers did not have the training in civil disturbance tactics that they had. That's what I was told by some of the interviews that we've had. Chief Conti, is that correct?
Yes, I've heard the same thing with respect to the training of the U.S. Capitol Police officers.
Are all of your Metropolitan Police officers trained in civil disturbance tactics?
We have platoons that are trained for every for every patrol district and special operations division. Some officers do not have the civil disturbance training. Those officers generally they work traffic duties or they work assignments back in patrol.
Chief Sund,
if I could add to one other
yes.
thing, all of our officers who leave the training academy, they get the basic civil disturbance unit training. So all of our officers do get the basic training, but we might have some members, for example, who've been on for 30 years and they haven't been CDU trained and they may work, back at a patrol district, but all of our members coming out the academy, they receive the civil disturbance unit training.
Mr. Sund, is that true with Capitol Hill police officers also? Are they all trained in civil disturbance tactics as they go through their training?
That was a process being implemented. I could check and let you know if that's been fully implemented for new recruits coming out of the academy. That was one of the initiatives I was working on.
So we were working on that, but as far as you know, this training was not being provided even for new officers, much less for those on the floor.
I believe the new officers coming out were, but I just need to confirm that.
Yeah, I think the bottom line here is that, unfortunately, our officers were not given the proper training with regard to infiltration of the building or the complex, with regard to dealing with civil disturbance, and they didn't have the equipment necessary to push back and, most importantly, to protect themselves.
Ill-prepared.
So my hope is that, again, one of the ways that this joint hearing and this committee report can be helpful is to bring the Capitol Police Department up to speed. And look, I appreciate the sacrifice and the bravery of that day, but I think we also owe it to those officers to provide them the training and the equipment they need to protect themselves and to protect the Capitol. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member. The chair now recognizes Senator Leahy.
Unbelievable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to follow up on what Senator Portman said. I agree with his concerns, but I might ask a question from the Appropriations Committee, and I know time is limited, so these could be yes or no answers. The Appropriations Committee has always worked in a bipartisan fashion to get money to the police. So, Mr. Sund, yes or no? The Appropriations Committee, and ultimately the Congress, have met your request for salaries and operating expenses in every fiscal year. Is that not correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And Mr. Stenger, the Appropriations Committee and ultimately the Congress has met your request for salaries and operating expenses every fiscal year. Is that correct? I don't hear an answer. So I'll ask Mr. Irving. Mr. Irving, the Appropriations Committee and ultimately the Congress has met your request for salaries and operating expenses in every fiscal year. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Mr. Stenger?
Yes, that's correct, sir.
Thank you very much. So I have to think that we had not that we had inadequate resources, but a failure to deploy the people that we were supposed to. I look at those who appeared. I looked at the lives that were lost, the police who fought to protect our capital. And we saw this as a violent, and I'd say planned and organized attack on the United States and the United States government by domestic terrorists. I hope they're all going to be prosecuted as fully as they can. But those, when we see people encouraging them, including from the former president of the United States, who urged his followers to fight and to show strength, I really wonder why we didn't take this seriously enough to be prepared for them. The hours it took to bring in the National Guard and everything else. So I read, Mr. Sutton, I read your detailed letter to Speaker Pelosi, but you said there wasn't enough intelligence shared, but in your same letter, you stated that the intelligence assessment, I'm quoting here, indicated that members of the Proud Boys, white supremacist groups, Antifa, and other extremist groups were expected to participate in the January 6th event, and they may be inclined to become violent. How much more intelligence do we need than that?
Yes, sir, that is correct. That is what the intelligence assessment said. It was very similar to the intelligence assessments that we had for the November and December MAGA marches. The intelligence assessments that we had developed for the January 6th event, all the way up until January 6th, we're all saying very much the same thing, and that's what we had planned for. We had planned for the possibility of violence, the possibility of some people being armed, not the possibility of a coordinated military-style attack involving thousands against the Capitol.
Violence and armed strike me as a pretty strong thing. And I would suggest that everybody get together and look at the future, because if you have something that goes on for months, the president calling them, everybody else calling them, I worry that there was not more there. I think until we root out the hate and drove the rioters to the door that day, no fence or tank or barrier is going to provide the safety we need. We want safety, but also talk about Benjamin Franklin, who says, those who give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. But I know a vote is on, and before I close, I do want to commend Chief Conte for your swift response. You don't have an easy job charged with protecting a city as large as Washington, D.C., and balance the delicate balance with dozens of other law enforcement. But I think that I commend the two chairs and ranking members for holding this hearing. We'll hold more in appropriations, but we're going to look very closely at the request this year and say, what do we do if we have another one of these? I thank you, and I yield back my time.
Thank you, Senator Leahy. Chair recognizes Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start off by just thanking our law enforcement witnesses for your service. I know there's 2020 is hindsight. It's pretty easy to money morning quarterback, and I want to make sure that we guard against doing so. Certainly what I've seen from testimony, it seems like there's a fair amount of thought, a fair amount of due diligence that went into this. So again, I appreciate your service. I also want to say I find the videos, as you said, Chief Sund, sickening, the violence reprehensible, the racial slurs repugnant, and I want to make sure the perpetrators, the people that engaged in the violence, are prosecuted to the full extent of the law. I've got a long list of questions, which this format really doesn't lend itself to asking. So what I will be doing is preparing a letter for the committee chair and hoping that they will ask those questions and investigate these issues that I'll be listing. But what I want to do is, in terms of asking some questions, I want to start out by reading excerpts from what I thought was a very interesting eyewitness account by J. Michael Waller. He is a senior analyst for a strategy at the Center of Security Policy. His areas of concentration include political and psychological warfare and subversion. He's a former professor and instructor at the Institute of World Politics at the Naval Postgraduate School. He's a current lecturer at the John F. Kennedy School Special Warfare Center at Fort Bragg. He wrote this piece titled, "I Saw Provocateurs at the Capitol Riot on January 6th. And he basically arrived on scene about 11:30 from Union Station. And I'll just start reading. At about 11:30, I walked from near Union Station and noticed a small number of Capitol Police dressed in full riot gear with shin guards and shoulder guards. Then I walked up Pennsylvania Avenue toward an empty Freedom Park. He noticed that the speech had broken up, and so a crowd was walking down Constitution Avenue. He joined them at 13th Street. But he said the mood of the crowd was positive and festive. Of the thousands of people I passed or who passed me along Constitution Avenue, some were indignant and contemptuous of Congress, but not one appeared angry or incited to riot. Many of the marchers were families with small children. Many were elderly, overweight, or just plain tired or frail, traits not typically attributed to the riot-prone. Many wore pro-police shirts or carried pro-police black and blue flags. Although the crowd represented a broad cross-section of Americans, mostly working class by their appearance and manner of speech, some people stood out. A very few didn't share the jovial, friendly, earnest demeanor of the great majority. Some obviously didn't fit in, and he describes four different types of people: plainclothes militants, agents provocateurs, fake Trump protesters, and then disciplined, uniformed column of attackers. I think these are the people.
Why? Why did I have a feeling he was going to do this? Oh, man, here we go. Here we go. Here we go.
People that probably planned this. He goes on, the D.C. Metropolitan Police were their usual professionally detached selves, standing on curbs or at street crossings and exchanging an occasional greeting from marchers. When we crossed 1st Street Northwest to enter the Capitol grounds where the Capitol Police had jurisdiction, I noticed no police at all. Several marchers expressed surprise. The openness seemed like a courtesy gesture from Congress, which controls security. That appearance of low threat level made no sense. Yet no Capitol Police appeared anywhere from what we could see. Now, again, I'm taking these excerpts in order, but there's a lot more to this piece. What looked like tens or even hundreds of thousands of people surged down the avenues as far as one can see.
Man.
But almost everyone seemed talkative and happy. No police could be seen on the platform for now. No police could be seen anywhere. People kept surging in from Constitutional Avenue, and the plaza quickly filled up and overflowed onto the lawn. Everyone squeezed closer and closer together, with most in high spirits. Some trouble began up in the front, near the base of the inaugural platform itself, but we could not see what was happening. Then something happened at the front of the crowd. It seemed like a scuffle, but from 40 feet back, I couldn't see. People started chanting USA, USA, and other slogans. For a few seconds, I saw what looked like police in a tussle with some of the marchers up front. What appeared to be an organized group in civilian clothes. This organized group are the cell I would call the plainclothes militants. They fit right in with MAGA people. Suddenly, energy surged from the front of the crowd as the anti-riot police, above on the inaugural platform, visibly tensed up. One fired a tear gas canister, not at the plainclothes militants in the front line, but into the crowd itself. Then another. Flash grenades went off in the middle of the crowd. The tear gas changed the crowd's demeanor. There was an air of disbelief as people realized that the police whom they supported were firing on them. What are you doing? We support you, someone yelled. All of a sudden, pro-police people felt the police were attacking them, and they didn't know why. More tear gas. A canister struck a girl in the face, drawing blood. The pro-police crowd went from disbelief and confusion to anger. I'll stop there. The last 5 pages is titled, Provocateurs Turn Unsuspecting Marchers into an Invading Mob. So I'd really recommend everybody in the committee read this account, and I ask that it be entered into the record. But Chief Sund, I want to ask you, is one of the House managers made a big deal that this was predictable, this was foreseeable, which I don't believe. Do you believe that what happened, the breach of the Capitol, did you believe that's foreseeable and predictable?
No, I don't, nor do, if you look at some of our other partner agencies, I think Acting Chief Conte actually made the statement that the breach of the Capitol was not something anybody anticipated, nor do I think some of our federal partners expected it. I don't think Secret Service would have brought up the Vice President if they expected it.
Doesn't make sense. Didn't they just say some other stuff earlier about the eve that they had stuff that was given to them, like a heads up, the eve of the 6th on January 5th? Huh? Now he's going, no, we didn't know anything at all. What? Do they, unless I'm missing something. Am I missing something? Because I don't want to be misreading or misleading or mishearing something, but I could have sworn just a little bit ago when they were questioning Sund, they were like, hey, didn't you get some information on the eve of the 6th, knowing that things were going to go down, or that would have given you more incentive to be prepared for what's going on? And now he's sitting here saying, no, we didn't know anything at all.
Is part of that because of what you'd experienced in the past, what this Mr. Waller experiences? The vast majority of Trump supporters are pro-law enforcement, and the last thing they would do is violate the law?
I will say that information I've received from some of my officers where they were trying to prevent people from coming into the building, and people were showing up saying, hey, we're police, let us through, and still wanting to violate the law to get inside the building. So,
Again, I've got a long, long list. I just want to close with the 2 former Sergeant of Arms. I knew these committees were going to start an investigation. I waited a couple weeks. I didn't see any letter go out, oversight letter, so I wrote my own on the 21st. And I just have a question for both the former Sergeant of Arms. Did you get my letter, my oversight letter with my questions?
I did not receive your letter. I left town right after I resigned, but I certainly look forward to working with you and your staff to answer your questions.
Okay, well, if you could give us an address, because we sent it to the Acting Sergeant of Arms. That Acting Sergeant of Arms won't even let us know whether they passed that letter along to you. Apparently they didn't. Mr. Stenger, did you receive my letter?
I don't recall it, Senator, but it might have come, but I don't recall.
Chief
Sund, one last question for you. Do you regret resigning?
Yes, I do, sir. I certainly do regret resigning. I love this agency. I love the women and men of this agency, and I regret the day I left.
Isn't it funny how he's when he started talking, when Johnson started talking, notice that Stephen Sund is less worried. He sounds more relaxed. He's just like, somebody who's on my team. Okay. No, I don't, we didn't get any type of signs of anything like that sort. You see what I'm saying? You can see it. Look at his how he's speaking, his demeanor, the whole shebang, the whole kit and caboodle.
Well, Mr. Irving, Mr. Stenger, I really wish you'd respond. First of all, look for my letter, and I'd like an answer to that as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. We're waiting for Senator Warner and any other member. I see Senator Rosen. Would you like to go ahead? Because you're the first member on. Senator Rosen.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Senator Klobuchar. And thank you, everyone, for being here today and springing this hearing. It's much needed, and I think it's the first of many.
This is the very, very much like the stereotypical, like, politician office. You know what I'm saying? Wow. Yeah, Debbie. And he says, I don't recall. I don't recall if I got that letter. I don't recall if I had this thing. Bruh.
But I'd like to start off by expressing that my thoughts are with the brave Capitol Police officers. They put their lives on the line to protect us on January 6th, and their heroic actions, like the ones of Eugene Goodman, they redirected those violent rioters away from us. They're going to forever be embedded in our minds. And we know that so many of these courageous men and women, they're really hurting in the aftermath of the insurrection.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been particularly heartbroken to hear about the death of Capitol Police Officer Howard Liebengood. He was protecting the Senate since 2005. He was stationed by the door of my Russell office. My prayers are with him, his family, and his loved one. But, you know, when the insurrection, when they came to storm our Capitol on January 6th, they came armed not only with weapons, but also with hate. Mere weeks before International Holocaust Remembrance Day, the world watched in horror as a rioter inside the Capitol proudly wore a Camp Auschwitz shirt. True. As he and others violently pushed forward on the House and the Senate floors. All the while, the rioters, they're waving Confederate flags, they're hanging nooses on the front lawn, they're verbally assaulting a Jewish reporter outside the Capitol, saying, "You are cattle" today. That refers to cattle cars that were used to transport Jews to Nazi death camps during the Holocaust. This violent attack on the Capitol featured followers from the anti-Semitic QAnon conspiracy theory. So, Mr. Conti, on January 4th, Metro Police Department arrested Enrique Chirrillo, leader of the racist anti-Semitic Proud Boys hate group. FBI claims the next day it shared with MPD concrete intelligence about extremist plans for violence on January 6th, including specific threats on members of Congress, maps of the tunnels under the Capitol complex. If MPD was tracking extremist, potentially violent white supremacist activity, then what exactly did you know on January 5th, and why didn't you alert anyone?
Thank you for that question. What the FBI sent, ma'am, on January 5th was in the form of an email. I would certainly think that something as violent as an insurrection in the Capitol would warrant, a phone call or something. But as Chief Sun mentioned earlier, the information that was sent was uncorroborated information. It was raw information that we had. That we received through the same lines through the JTTF. That information was not fully vetted and had not been sent through the chains of the Metropolitan Police Department. What the Metropolitan Police Department was prepared for was the larger violence and demonstrations that we expected to see in our city.
That's fine. I have to ask Mr. Sun the same question now. What did you know as of Tuesday night, January 5th? Because I have a follow-up for both of you on this one. So quickly, Mr. Sun, what did you know on January 5th? And were you alarmed or not alarmed? What did you expect?
So yeah, I was concerned. We had the intelligence that was coming out, the intelligence that we'd be planning for. Again, keep in mind, the intelligence assessments that we had developed at the end of December, the beginning of, and the one for January 3rd were very, very similar. They just provided a little bit more specificity. So we had already been planning for the threat for violence, the threat for armed possible people protesting, and that's what we were planning for. Now, if you're referring to the Norfolk letter again, I just became aware that the department was aware of that 24 hours ago. So on the 6th or the 5th or the 4th, I was not aware that memo existed.
So you're saying that there's a breakdown between you and the FBI, because we have rallies, protests, and things happen in Washington all the time. How many could both of you just maybe give a guess, how many do you think are usually with armed insurrectionists or come heavily armed out of the hundreds, perhaps thousands of rallies that we see in Washington through the year?
We know the last three incidents, the first two MAGA rallies, men and women of the Metropolitan Police Department recovered firearms from several people who were attending the demonstrations at the first MAGA rally as well as the second one. Aside from that, those have been really the only The only demonstrations where we've seen individuals coming armed.
Well, do you think this was an intelligence breakdown or a resource issue?
I think that the intelligence did not make it where it needed to be.
So you think the FBI did not raise this to the level they needed to with the Metropolitan Police Department, in your mind?
We received it in the form of an email that came as an alert bulletin at 7:00 p.m. the day before. Al Posture is the Metropolitan Police Department. Again, I think it's reflected in our deployment in terms of not just the National Guard that was deployed, but as well as other officers from surrounding jurisdictions. That reflected the seriousness that we took with respect to the threats that we were expecting to see in the city.
Mr. Sund, can you tell me, do you think this was a resource issue or intelligence breakdown or something else? If you be brief, because this is very important.
Yes, ma'am. I'll be very brief. It was part of my introduction. I think it was more than just the Norfolk letter. I think we need to look at the whole entire intelligence community and the view they have on some of the domestic extremists and the effect that they have. I look at this as a intelligence problem that impacted this event. Yes.
So what information would you have had to have heard to have raised up the flag to get more resources for the Capitol Police? Because thank goodness, I mean, we saw loss of life, and thank goodness there wasn't more, but one is too many. So what is your threshold then? What should be the threshold to protect the Capitol and protect your officers?
I did in advance reach out to the Washington, D.C. police to coordinate resources, and I did also go to both the House and Senate Sergeant Arms to request the National Guard.
Facts, BAP.
And okay. Mr. Conti, I think I have 5 seconds and we can take this off the record, but I believe that there's some plans by QAnon for something to happen at the Capitol on March 4th. I want to hear what steps we're taking to protect the Capitol.
Very true.
On March 4th from any more violent extremists. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, we'll have you talk to him about that later. Senator Warner has arrived via video, and I also want to mention Senator Peters will work with our witnesses for restroom breaks and the like and let us know so that we don't want to take a long break, but I can imagine you need a break at some point here. So, Senator Warner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm going to have to wrap up here, too.
Appearing today.
Let's hear this last piece.
You know, we've talked a little bit about the deployment.
Oh, by the way, all of this has been horse-ish, by the way. I mean, I'd be using every expletive I can think of right now, but I'm trying to be a gentleman about everything, and I'm trying to be semi-formal. And real talk, this is trash. Because we just heard in the very beginning one thing, and now that there's turned it to something else, you know what I'm saying? Which makes no bloody sense. Yeah, there you have it, y'all. We're not done yet. I'm going to still listen to this guy, see what this guy has to say. But yeah, it's interesting how they're just flip-flopping and they're trying to point the blame at somebody else rather than taking the blame. Some of these guys stepped down and walked away. So some of these guys resigned. Or actually, 2 out of those 3 men stepped down and resigned. Why? Why, you ask? Why, you may be thinking? Because they're guilty of what they did. They were ill-prepared, or they had all the information that they needed, but they did not act on that information. They just let it be what it was. The 6th happened. Ish hits the fan. There you have it. Get those likes all the way up, my beautiful family. Get those likes all the way up.
Deployment of the National Guard.
Exactly, Queen.
One of the questions, I guess, Mr. Sund, or frankly, or Chief Conte, you know, the fact that the district did not have the ability to bring the Guard to the table because of, frankly, the fact that they're not a state and Mayor Bowser is not treated, I think, in a totally fair fashion in this. This may be outside your lane, but her inability to bring the Guard to the table, and actually any of you on the panel can answer this.
Actually, sorry, don't mean to pause or interrupt this so much, but Sarah, I do agree. These men are also being used as scapegoats as well, because there's many more people that should be to blame to this situation, not just them. They're not the only ones, okay? but they are the only ones getting questioned and getting thrown under the bus because they are the ones in charge of their departments. That's the reason why this issue is happening. It's very annoying, yes, but at the same time, this is the bed that they made. You know what I mean? This is the job that they signed up for.
That to me is a reflection of the disempowerment of the district. On a going forward basis, at least in terms of being able to deploy the Guard, shouldn't the mayor of the District of Columbia have the ability to do that without all the additional hurdles they have to go through in terms of federal checklist?
Yes, I absolutely agree with that.
Does anybody else want to answer on that question as well?
Yes, sir. I'm happy to add in. I think we have an established process for the Capitol Police to make the request through the Capitol Police Board that is also equally as effective.
Well, again, I feel like the long-term discrimination against the district, we've seen it in some of the COVID legislation where they did not receive the same kind of level of support that other states did. We saw it play out real time in terms of on January 6th, the hurdles from the previous administration. I actually have concerns whether the deployment of the Guard was affirmatively slowed down. I hope that we in the Congress will, as a supporter of DC statehood, I'd like to see that move forward, but even short of that, trying to ensure that the mayor has appropriate powers going forward. I know there were some questions already raised about the FBI and whether the intel that came out of the Norfolk FBI office was ever fully relayed to all of you individuals. But can you talk more generally about the FBI's responsiveness, sharing of intelligence? I had a number of conversations. I called Director Wray on Monday, the 4th, trying to express concerns that there might be this kind of activity. I never expected this level of violence. I had a number of conversations with senior FBI leadership on the 5th through the 6th. I candidly I don't think even the full FBI could have been fully informed of all of what was going to come to pass, but I felt like the FBI felt that they were in better shape in terms of intel and preparation than what came to be the case. And I'd like each of you to comment on how well you felt that the FBI did in terms of sharing intelligence and then coordinating when the actual activities of the 6th played out.
So I'll go ahead and, did you want me to address that first?
Yeah, I mean, okay. I can't see where y'all are, so
yeah,
every one of you can take a crack at that.
I'll go ahead and start first. I think the relationship we have with the FBI is outstanding. I think in my time with the Metropolitan and my time here, we've seen nothing but the relationship get better. The construct that we have that's very similar to some of the other major cities is having the Joint Terrorism Task Force, being involved with that. The information we're getting in is good. I think the process and having, like I said earlier, the wider lens of what information is being collected, maybe looking at the agencies that are consumers of their information and what their intelligence collection requirements are is something that we need to look at. But I think, getting that information in and then having it processed and pushed forward in an effective manner is something we need to look at. I would say on the 6th, when this started happening, immediately the FBI, as being a partner of ours, established a process where with Capitol Police and FBI Police, we can begin to analyze video footage, analyze other evidence, to begin going out and making arrests of the individuals that had created the insurrection of the Capitol.
Yeah, I'll go next.
Did we get enough intel beforehand? If we get the balance of the panel to respond.
Yeah, sure. I would echo what Chief Son just mentioned. We've had a great working relationship with the FBI. I think it's a whole of intelligence approach, not specifically just the FBI. When we have something as significant as what occurred here at the U.S. Capitol, if there is information, specific information out there that our government is responding to, I would think that something of that nature would rise to the level more than just an email that's sent to law enforcement agencies. That should be a larger, more involved conversation about specifics, not just some of the unvetted raw information that's out there. We see a lot of that, but I think it's more of a whole intelligence approach, not specifically the FBI. They are great partners to the Metropolitan Police Department.
Thank you. Let me just, I don't know if any of the other panel members want to add any comment on that. Let me just say that this is, my concern is that in Virginia, we've seen these kind of anti-government extremists take to the streets of Charlottesville in 2017, resulting in the death of Heather Heyer. We see the same kind of groups come to the forefront on January 6th. I think this is an ongoing threat to national security. I fear at times that while the FBI and others have pointed this out, that it didn't get the level of serious review that it should have. With the prior administration, I felt at times that they did not want to take the information that was coming out of the FBI. I hope on a going forward basis, we're going to be able to be more coordinated in terms of taking on anti-government extremism, whether it comes from the left or the right. This is a real ongoing threat. I can tell you from our intelligence committee, we've seen that many of these groups have connections and ties to anti-government extremist groups in Europe, where they've taken a great precedent. I know my time's expired, Madam Chairman, but this is something we need more work on. Thank you for holding this hearing.
Thank you very much, Senator Warner. We look to working with you and the Intelligence Committee on this. Next will be Senator Langford, and after that, Senator Carper.
Unfortunately, I can't go through all of this, but you guys get the general idea, okay? Oh boy. So there you have it, y'all. I mean, obviously the hearings are still going to keep going and going and going. As you see, they're basically asking a lot of the same questions over and over and over again. But at the same time, it is important to hear the multiple different different things. Hold up, let me hear this.
Limited communications with my department. I know my department was getting ready to go and testify at some of the initial committee hearings, and I think that she had called for my resignation without full understanding of what we had prepared for, what we had gone through. I think she deserved to read, firsthand what we had prepared for and what I dealt with for that 6th.
Okay, that's helpful. You had said in this, you talked several times about thousands of well-coordinated, well-equipped, violent criminals and described them with climbing gear and all the things that you've also testified here. You also mentioned this letter about the pipe bombs that were located, that the first word would come at 12:52 that a pipe bomb had been located at the Republican National Committee headquarters. How was that located? Who found it, and why was that particular moment the moment that it was found?
I don't know why that was a particular moment that it was found. I believe it was an employee of the Republican National Committee that had located it in the rear of the building that had called it into Capitol Police Headquarters.
By the way, why
you had mentioned before that.
Why does this guy right here, Langford, look like Owen Wilson or Luke Wilson, whichever one? Wow, it's crazy. Wow, you know what I mean? Doesn't he kind of look like an Owen Wilson or a Luke Wilson dude? You know what I'm saying? It's Owen Wilson, I think. Wow.
You thought this was part of the coordination, that there were several that were out there that would take away resources at that exact moment. But there's no way to know that they would find it at that exact moment. I'm glad they did find it. They found another one at the Democratic headquarters as well at 1:50, and you document that as well.
I'm sorry.
But you had to send quite a few individuals to be able to go to the RNC and the DNC to be able to go deal with those explosives that were planted there. Is that correct?
That is correct. And just for your information, the RNC pipe bomb, that was one that was really run by Capitol Police. The DNC Metropolitan ended up taking that and running that so we can run two concurrently. That resulted in the evacuation of two congressional buildings, the Cannon House Office building as well as one of the Library of Congress buildings. So it took extensive resources.
So.
Unfortunately, I'm sorry. I have to jump off here. I've extended my time. But there you have it, guys. I mean, obviously, they're going to be going through this still. They're going to be going through the same questions over and over and over again. Of course, it is, howdy doody time. Yeah, that's a good one, too. Yeah, he kind of does look like that guy too. But anyway, I wanted to say thank you everybody who tuned in. It was part of the conversation, part of the watch party here. I know this was kind of impromptu and everything, but I mean, you know, it was my morning show. But I will be on tonight at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time doing some phone calls and whatnot, so be on the lookout for that. I don't know what we're going to be talking about. We might talk about the hearing here. We might be talking about whatever's developing, developing news is going on throughout the day. So I will be on tonight at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Be sure to tune in and be a part of the conversation and part of the Pascal Show family chat. Anyway, it's time to get going. Be sure to go and check out my merch store. The link is down below. We got all kinds of new swag, new drip over there, so please go check it out. I appreciate all y'all. I'm sorry I have to jump off. I'm sorry, but I got some things I got to do. You know, I got to adult hard today. But I will be on tonight, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Be good to yourselves. Be good to one another. I'll see you guys tonight. This is The Pascal Show. Bye.
Peace and wellness for the holidays. Don't cancel them. Prepare STL. Decorate. Make it as normal as you can, but slow the spread of COVID. Wear a mask. Wash your hands. Watch your distance. Prepare STL, helping St. Louisans of color prepare and prevail.
But you see how he makes these S's in his body right here? That's where he's hanging on, and then he's moving forward with the locomotion of his ribs. That is classic Missouri rat snake right there. I mean, so I'm gonna go ahead and grab him before he gets into a hole. Now, these snakes are not biters. They won't bite as long as you don't squeeze them. If you just stop them like this, it'll freeze them, and then you just gently pull them back. As long as you don't squeeze them, they won't bite.
Yo, Mike, what's up, man?
Guy? Good to see you, man.
Yeah, so Sugar Fire.
Yeah.
Fully open, right?
Yeah, we're pretty much open. You can't sit inside yet. Monday you can sit inside a little bit. We'll have 25% of the tables inside, and then we're letting it rip outside.
So I know that there's a lot of people really concerned about staying safe and all of that.
No,
so what are you guys doing in regards to that?
Well, we have extra people to clean and rub everything down all the time. Everybody inside's wearing masks. And we have those little stickers on the ground so everyone can stay 6 feet apart.
Right on.
The tables are all spaced out, inside and outside.
Sugar Fire, open in full effect right now. They're staying healthy, they're staying clean. Go get you a rack of ribs. Sugar Fire, open right now.
Thanks.
The Fur and Leather Center, providing the highest of fur and leather goods.
I'm sorry, I can't make this interview boring because this man is too exciting as a host. And I'm truly saying this, and if y'all can't do this, me and this man here is gonna leave and go somewhere else so we can get some love. I want everyone in the building to say, I love Pascal on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Wow.